Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, former mayor of a California beach town and best-selling author, Debbie Peterson, coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 26 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Vimeo, Stitcher Radio, Blog Talk Radio, and there's many, many more. In fact, we're proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM and #2 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot out of the top 60 and #2 on caringvillage.com. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Jeffrey Madden is a co-founder and chief executive officer at ADvantage Therapeutics, which is a clinical biotechnology firm developing a novel immunotherapy for Alzheimer's disease. But before we get started, I do want to take this moment and thank my last week's guest, Julie Potiker, author of the new book, Snap, From Chaos to Calm. And she talks about mindfulness, very much needed in these days. And just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, including this one, at thecaregiverdave.com or any of our other 26 global audio and video networks that I mentioned earlier. Okay, enough of that. Jeffrey, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave radio show. I always like to ask my guests, just who is Jeffrey Madden and why was he placed on this earth?
It's great to be here, Debbie and Dave. And I'm a bit of a metaphysical guy, so my answer to that will be define my dharma, be awakened, and really, find a place in the world in terms of purpose to work with other people to make the world a better place. And I think there's two halves to life. There's first half, chasing success as societally defined, and the second half, God willing, we all make that, to chase significance, to do something bigger than you to make the world a better place. And so the first half of my life was very much focused on success in finance as an institutional investment manager. And I dare say awakened to find a bigger purpose. And a lot of that had to do with necessary suffering by way of my late grandmother, Genevieve, who suffered from Alzheimer's. And I really put my heart and soul into finding, as you said, an immunotherapy that I think can make the world a better place and band together, with world-class people to do exactly that and help people in this humanitarian crisis, both patients and caregivers, to make a difference. So I'm squarely focused on that and in a very synchronistic way. Happy to report that we're making great progress on that. I'd love to tell you more about it.
Yeah, we had someone on not too long ago who was experimenting with some Alzheimer's medication. And it's the first time I've ever heard that the medication was actually making a patient better, not just keeping them from getting worse. And now you're talking about something. Is there a breakthrough going on in the Alzheimer's research these days?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, you see the headlines these days with the monoclonal antibodies, with both Biogen and more recently Lilly, that is slowing the decline. And, if I go all the way back to my days as a biotech investor, where, I invested in companies that really made the world a better place, Celgene, Genentech, Illumina, Intuitive Surgical. These are companies that just made structural change, in their respective indications. And, this pattern recognition, is vernacular, within investment management. And I'll just say this, that, mice have been cured, from Alzheimer's, cancer, HIV. But one of the biggest lessons learned for me is that it rarely translates, animal system rarely translates into human system. And what I think, is a big breakthrough here And something I detected going back about 10 years ago, when my late grandmother Genevieve was ravaged by Alzheimer's, is that there's big signal, meta signal in terms of analysis with priming your peripheral immune system to reduce neuroinflammation in the brain. You saw it with different vaccines and adjuvants. And, these penicillin moments of efficacious and safe outcomes for Alzheimer patients was the strongest signal I saw. And I dare say, I've got a pretty good pattern recognition managing a multi-billion-dollar fund back in the day. And now, what you see is this, I will call it a breakthrough, is making its way, into the clinic. And I'd say we're at the vanguard, of doing a confirmation study. But 7 years ago, there's a study, a big phase 2 study for a conjugate protein vaccine that was targeting A-beta 42. And, this vaccine had, 5 arms. The vaccine failed as going after amyloid, but one of the control arms, you had this stunning disease modification where 50% of the patients in this control arm, where there's 50 patients, had, the same or better cognition with hippocampus as a downstream biomarker. And this is an adjuvant alum, which is our lead compound, which we're taking into a clinical trial right now. And so if you could have, that type of treatment effect, I definitely would classify that as a breakthrough. So we're excited to do exactly that and get into a human clinical trial here in the next month or two and get results out in 2025.
That's great. Does it frustrate you the way society keeps changing the definition of terms? I always thought that the word vaccine meant if you take it, you won't get it. And apparently we learned in the last few years that's not so. So how are you defining the word vaccine when you use it?
Well, vaccines, you've got, different classifications, for vaccines, and you got to be, very specific if you're talking about, subunit, live attenuated, or mRNA. And of course, we've seen more recently, this mRNA, I'll say broad adoption, but that's a different vaccine relative to subunit, think flu, and certainly live attenuated. I'm on the board of Rational Vaccines, which is developing a live attenuated vaccine for HSV-1 and HSV-2. That's an ancient virus with 75 proteins. And so you're getting full antigenic breadth, generally speaking, with live attenuated. mRNA, is just a different thing. And expressing the spike protein, for example, for COVID, may not have the same efficacious outcomes. So, it's language is perception's silent partner, a wise man once said, and I think it certainly applies to vaccines.
You mentioned that mice have Alzheimer's. How do you know, and how do you measure a mouse who has different stages of Alzheimer's? That just really confuses me.
Yeah, and it's this is something that's
into walls. They can't find their cheese. I mean, what is it?
I mean, this is something that's confused a lot of people. And it goes back to transgenic mice, where you're basically changing some genomic sequence so that these mice create, in the case of Alzheimer's research, amyloid, this toxic protein. But mice are much different than primates and certainly Homo sapiens. And so, this translation, Rudy Tanzi, you look up ChatGPT, top Alzheimer's scientist in the world, he ranks as number one. He's out of Harvard. He's the chairman of our SAB. And he has this aphorism that what happens in mice stays in mice. And this translation in the human system, is just a very difficult thing to do. I've got a lot of tracks in my back relying on mouse model preclinical. And so, one of my lessons learned, just to riff on this for a second, is, start with human system signal. And I think that's what you're seeing in Alzheimer's. You're seeing that happen, where nearly a third of the over 180 clinical trials in Alzheimer's are repurposed agents. where you detected, this signal. And in our case, I'll say, penicillin moment, but it's all about what you do after a penicillin moment that matters. And you got, there's a big Herculean lift, to get to preclinical, to clinical. And then, but again, to this solve backwards, mental model. I think that's well suited when you're dealing with a syndrome, not necessarily a disease, and it's multigenic. That's really important, is right there, when you say Alzheimer's disease, there's a tip off here that, again, language being perception silent partner, I would offer that you're talking about a heterogeneous condition that's multigenic, that doesn't suit itself well to traditional drug development, going after one target.
Debbie, you got any questions?
I'm, if we're a little bit talking about a little confusion, how does the immunotherapy come into all of this? What about what you're talking about has anything to do with immunotherapy?
Yeah. Okay. Well, technically, the monoclonal antibodies, that's immunotherapy, exogenous. Okay. And what I'm talking about, is, endogenous, and, just like mechanism, I could speak to, our lead compound, ADOA4. It's, at a very specific dose at 2 mg, it's injected, subcutaneous, think about like getting a vaccine shot for the flu. It stays at the site of injection. And then, of course, you have a immune response, both innate and adaptive. And you have phagocytosis, and you have macrophages, which are kind of like Pac-Man of your innate immune system, come in, and they secrete, in the case of our compound, a very specific interleukin. Think about interleukins as being groups of cytokines and the Wi-Fi of your immune system. And so this Wi-Fi system gets engaged. And in the case of this interleukin, it's known to cross-communicate to the brain and modulate the activation of your brain's resident immune cells called microglia. Okay. And the microglia, when they get into an inflammatory state, bad things happen, in the brain. And so to switch the microglia from neuroinflammatory to neuroprotective and regain homeostasis, that's the indirect mechanism of action for our immunotherapy. And so your body is like a bioreactor. If you just point it in the right direction, it could do amazing things. And so many times, go ahead, please.
Well, so the simple explanation, and too simple, I'm sure, is that it's not that it makes you immune to a whole bunch of stuff. It's not like improving your immune system or reducing your inflammation necessarily, but it makes you immune to the things, the amyloids that interfere with brain function, that are active in Alzheimer's. Is that accurate to say it?
Yeah, I would say it. Yeah, so again, like, we don't know, exactly what the cause is here. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone has been, going after, and it really was dogma for a very long period of time. The amyloid hypothesis that, if you clear this toxic protein, that you have a reversal, mm-hmm. Of Alzheimer's. And so, it's, going after, just one target, for something heterogeneous, is right. A very, very difficult task. And so, what I would say is, there's the pathophysiology. What we believe for Alzheimer's is inflammation. And so if you take, this biology of aging worldview, and we know one of the lanes of aging, is inflammation. And we know the biggest causation for, dementia is aging. And so the pathophysiology, what we would offer, is a primary driver of the pathophysiology, is inflammation. And so, just to riff on that for a second, that, so you have neurons, that are anatomically intact, but because of this, neuroinflammation, you have a functional block. You have 86 billion neurons, and you have, thousands of synapses that have a functional block because of that neuroinflammation. So if you could reduce it, you could have restoration, of cognition. But you got to catch it early. You got to catch it way early. Yeah.
So
and that's one of the, please go ahead.
Well, do you see it as being something that would work alongside some of the current things that are working, or do you see it as being entirely different?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key point, is that long term, neuro's got to get where oncology is. And you're in the era of combination therapy in oncology. But to do that, you need, some cornerstone therapeutics, at least one or two, that you could build around that have, very significant treatment of clinically meaningful treatment effect of, like, let's call it 50% or higher. Of course, safe, easy to administer and low cost. The pathway inhibitors, really in oncology were a catalyst, for the era of combination therapy that's going on right now. And to your point, the monoclonal antibodies with Lilly and Biogen, they're targeting amyloid. They're doing a great job of clearing amyloid. But just imagine if you have that at a lower dose to deal with microhemorrhaging that we know is part of the side effects, and our lead compound I'd offer, or there's others out there that target inflammation, and that's a great step, to get after different targets, in a clinician setting. And then, ideally, I will emphasize that I think the cornerstone therapeutic will really have a pleiotropic effect. So there's simultaneous, pathways and targets, that are being initiated, by a compound that really probably will be the signature of a true, significantly clinically disease modifying therapeutic. Will have that, out of all likelihood, pleiotropic effect, and that's what we're seeing with our compound.
Can you define pleiotropic for those of us who aren't medically oriented?
Sure. So really, it's a pleiotropic effect is simultaneously producing more than one effect. That's so the layman definition.
It fixes so you're saying it combines with other medications, or can be combined with other methodologies and fix the multiple things that appear to be causes or apparent in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, just think about like A2A4, like our lead compound, the indirect pathway I described, to flip and switch the brain from neuroinflammatory to neuroprotective. And we're also identifying in our preclinical, this clearance of metabolic waste, that could also be inducing inflammation. So you have a indirect pathway and a direct pathway. So that would fall into this pleiotropic effect for the A2A4 compound. We got a lot more work to do, but I'm just sharing that as an example.
Yeah.
Why is the clinical trial failure rate so high?
Yeah, that gets a lot to do with, this classical approach, and again, right there,
should they change
Alzheimer's disease. Well, what really happened was, going after, this amyloid, just turned out to be a very difficult lift. And I'll just share this with you, because, the majority of these trials, until more recently, the primary target has been amyloid. Interestingly enough, in the last 2 years, inflammation has become the primary target, which is great. I think that's amazing that you decouple from this dogma of targeting, amyloid. But just think about this, where based on autopsy studies, 30% of older adults, have brains loaded, with enough amyloid beta, tau, or both, to indicate, an Alzheimer's diagnosis, but without any of the symptoms. So
what do you attribute that to?
Well, that gets into this, the current pathology is incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
so it's gets back to this heterogeneous reality, of Alzheimer's and neuro generally, and Alzheimer's specifically. And you have 100 different genes headlined by, APOE4. And so you need to have, this cornerstone therapeutic or therapeutics to emerge to get after multiple pathways and targets. And that's happening. You had a watershed moment just more recently, and the end of the beginning is the way I classify that. And now it opens up, for folks like us, to work really hard and get the money raised we need and get into clinic and, show that, we could go after neuroinflammation and perhaps even have a bigger treatment effect. Just like we did before.
Why do you think you're going to have more success?
Well, it has a lot to do with, again, this lesson learned for me is rely on human system signal. And don't just take my word for it either. Suzanne Hendricks is the leading AD statistician, I'd say, in the world. She's the CEO founder of Pentara. And, she did, this penicillin moment, I referenced before, this predecessor trial where you saw this amazing, disease modification with 50% of the patients, in that control arm at 2 mg alum, having the same or better cognition. And the way I'll just read exactly, because when it comes to statistics, I want to be precise. In her words, the 2 mg ADO4 control arm of the trial showed a significant slower decline over the combined 4 other groups on clinical outcomes, cognition, and quality of life, and MRI hippocampal volume as biomarker. So that's coming from one of the leading Alzheimer's statisticians in the world, and then Rudy Tanzi, Dr. Rudy Tanzi, he's the chairman, of our SAB, really, just guiding our preclinical and mechanism of action. And then there's a whole host of world-class people that have come together because they see this human system signal. And the final, stamp of approval I'll share with you is on the regulatory side. I think one of the biggest risks, particularly for clinical biotech, doesn't matter what I think or investors think, the ultimate due diligence is regulators. So if they don't check off, you're not getting in the human system for good reason too. And we just were awarded, this innovation passport by way of the MHRA in the UK. The MHRA is the FDA equivalent in the UK, which is one of the most coveted accelerated approval pathways in the world. We were just awarded that. We're the only Alzheimer's indication at the moment to have that innovation passport. And central to their decision-making was this data that I referenced Suzanne commenting on, and how that treatment effect stacks up relative to historical studies, including the monoclonal antibodies. And what you see in this data, we're about to publish on it, is that the treatment effect is better and faster, relative to, I'll call the current standard of care. And it's so nice to be able to say we have a certain level of standard of care, that's just happened, with the FDA approval.
Well, our audience are burned out caregivers, and 30% of them actually die before their loved ones do. But those who are caring for an Alzheimer's patient, that number goes up to 40% will die before their loved ones do. What do you hope by being on the show that these caregivers to Alzheimer's patients will be able to take away? I mean, is it just giving them a renewed hope that help is on the way, or what should they take away from this interview?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway, for sure, hope is on the way for sure. And this isn't something preclinical. This isn't something in mouse model. This is working backwards from human system signal from a penicillin moment, with statistical rigor and a world-class team that's been recognized by one of the top 3 regulators in the world. And we're moving at warp speed.
Well,
This
you
is just
certainly
over.
have enough money. Your Alzheimer's Association probably takes in more than the Cancer Society, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the fundraise is the fundraise, and we've got the support from amazing, investors, including RMB Capital in Chicago.
Yeah, well, Alzheimer's
But
is no, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't decide who's going to get it. The rich, the poor, the racial, the diversity, the men, women, you name it. It picks everybody, and many times
yeah,
it picks intelligent geniuses, and it
yeah.
picks us dumb people as well.
My grandmother had a photographic memory,
Right.
and I was sitting right there, like so many other people, helpless. And back to your original question is, that steered me into, finding my dharma and finding a purpose. And here we are, to come back around to your last question, just over 2 years ago, I sunsetted my finance career, came in as a co-founder, obviously, leading, a world-class team. And in just over 2 years, we've allocated, just over $10 million, and our first patient in is in 2 months. And we'll have interim data 6 months after last patient in. So conservatively, I'm thinking Q2 2025. This innovation passport allows us to have patient access, starting in the UK. So patient access, if we confirm, we got to execute. The biggest risk for us is execution at this point. If we have a confirmation study that's successful, and mirrors or better, what we did before, we'll have patient access. And so that's more than hope. That's concrete, timelines here, to do something about this humanitarian crisis.
Wow. Debbie?
Well, congratulations. I'm just thrilled to hear it. And what I like most about it is the fact that you're not saying we are the cure, the only cure, and talk to us and no one else. I love it that you are working in tandem, or hope that it will be something that works in tandem. So thank you for your work. I think it's marvelous.
Yeah, well, thanks, for being out there, allowing me to communicate, and others too. And that's the point is, back to the significance, that doing something to make the world a better place that you can't do by yourself. We got to bond together to make this happen. And that's exactly what's happening, at ADvantage. And you guys are the tip of the spear, out there to allow people to hear the important work that's being done. So thank you.
Yes. Well, it's amazing how time flies when you're having fun here. But, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, or want to ask you questions, or want to read a book that you wrote? Did you write a book?
I've published in my finance days in peer-reviewed journals. I haven't written a book just yet. Maybe the chapter's being written right now. But you could find ADvantage Therapeutics. That's our company. The website's out there. Jeff at ADvantageTherapeutics.com is my email. I won't give my cell just yet, but those are two different avenues for people to get a hold of us. And yeah, I really appreciate the time and dedication to your guys' craft. It means a lot to me to be on the show.
Great. Well, it's likewise here. Debbie, how can people reach you and learn more about what you do?
I've got 4 or 5 books out now, and DebbiePeterson.com is the easiest way to find those. And I have a podcast and all kinds of fun things happening. So just go to DebbiePeterson.com.
Yeah. And remember that all our live shows become recorded pod and video casts on all your favorite platforms. Just a plug for me, my #1 best-selling book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is spreading wisdom all over the world, and it's available wherever books are sold, and also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com, where you can also schedule a free 30-minute initial coaching call to talk about whatever you're struggling with. Many times, a 30-minute worth of wisdom is all it takes to resolve a problem. And I invite you all to join my Caregiver Dave Facebook online support group community of 34,000 caregivers. lots of tools, resources, videos, this radio show, and much more. We're just trying to keep as many of you caregivers who are dying before your loved ones do alive, because the stats are very worrisome. Hey, also, if you like or follow, if you hit the like or follow button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on, it helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google's search engine algorithms, however that works. So thanks again to all my listeners out there, to my guests, my co-hosts, all over the world, for tuning in every Wednesday and making us the #1 caregiver podcast and radio show on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel, may God richly bless you all. Bye-bye. I'm Dave Nasani. My 4th book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. As a young boy, I was told I possessed an unusual amount of wisdom for my age. As a young man, I found myself counseling friends and older family members whenever they needed answers to their problems. Then at 21, I read the Bible for the very first time and learned how King Solomon asked God for wisdom instead of riches, yet he received both. I was so impressed that I too asked God for wisdom. Soon after, I discovered when lying on my hammock, I would receive wisdom from God. This book is the result of my passion to share with the world wisdom's tremendous benefits. Join me as I reveal practical aspects of wisdom for the mind, body, and spirit. 31 lessons I learned from God that can change your life. Available in hardcover, Audible, Kindle, and paperback, wherever books are sold. I've spoken all over the country and London, and am available to speak at your event. Contact me at hammockwisdom.com.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.